Okay, starting.
Oh wow, there we go. So
Live from Dublin.
we're live from Dublin. So Finn, we'll just wait about 60 seconds and then we'll crack into things if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
Finn, are you in the first round office in San Francisco?
Yeah, we just moved to a new office here, so we've expanded the footprint here, and that's there's some construction going on downstairs to build out an event space and a kitchen for some of the dinners that we do.
And it's not your first time living in San Francisco, though, is it?
No, well, I lived in San Francisco when I was a kid. When I was 2 years old, we moved from Boston to San Francisco, and then when I was about 9, we moved back. But now I feel like I'm home here, so it's good. I hope to never pay a moving company $1 again.
And what shoes are you wearing today? Last time I met you, you had some pretty fly Nike Flyknits on.
Yeah, I got those.
Oh, lovely. Right.
Yeah, Air Max ones that sort of a good go-to.
Oh, cool. So I think, Finn, it's absolutely fantastic to have you. This is the first of our Collision Hangouts. We've got a few over the coming weeks, and it follows a tradition that we've done, or we really kind of started with the Web Summit and with Collision. Last year, we've had some fantastic people, from great investors to journalists and fantastic entrepreneurs, and it provides an opportunity for lots of the startups that will be coming to Collision. So we've got about 1,000 startups will be exhibiting at Collision, which is our kind of second year of our first conference in the States. So it's really great to have you. I'd love to kind of just to provide a little context. I'd love you to tell us a little bit about kind of first round and your fund's focus, and then maybe a little bit about you.
Sure. So I've been at First Round since about 2008, and since 2003 or so, First Round's been solely focused on seed stage. So at this point, we're the oldest and probably largest fund that's solely focused on seed stage investing. The definition of seed has changed. Now we talk about mango seeds and pre-seeds and all these things. With this current environment, it's pretty crazy. But I think for us, what seed means is you're really still in that phase of figuring out your product. You're building your team. You may have a prototype built. You may be going to market either shortly, or you may have had you may be in market but just barely. And I think we're here to help you figure. I apologize for the noise. And we're really here to help you iterate. And our job is basically to maximize learning per dollar between your first institutional investment and your Series A.
So then, I think you just mentioned we live in these like really exciting times, and we see it here. We started this little conference kind of four and a bit years ago, and in our second year in Dublin, we had 36 startups that came along and kind of demoed or exhibited. And for Collision, it's just in our second year, it's like 1,000. It'll be over 1,000 startups, which is just kind of. It's just something unique or special or crazy is happening in the world. So amidst all that kind of craziness, I'm just wondering what sectors and what kind of startups in particular maybe excite you at the moment.
Sure. So I mean, first, I think just to the craziness, I think my view has always been the more people that take the leap to start a company, the better. I think there's something incredible about the moment where you take an idea, you build something, you put it in the market, and someone that you've never met before pays money to use something that you built. And I think the messiness of that process, the stress of that process, and the wonder of that process is something you either love or you hate after trying it. And regardless of whether you have dramatic success or it sort of flames out, I think the fact that it's so much easier for anyone with a good idea and the guts to try can get into get great advice and guidance. I think that's a wonderful thing. And it creates a Series A crunch, and there's lots of sort of adverse consequences for the average startup. But I think that for the individual entrepreneur, the chance to do that on their own, whether they do it and then go back to industry, whether they do it and try it again and again until they have a hit, but I just think that experience is excellent, and so I'm happy that we live in these times where anyone can try. To answer your question, I have we don't do sector focuses at first round. We do stage focus, so seed stage is all we do. But what that means is I can look at pretty much anything, and so I would say the only area that I'm not particularly interested in is ad tech, and I put some sort of the esoteric fintech stuff kind of in there for my own personal interest. First round certainly has a strength in those areas, but my partners Chris and Bill Trenchard tend to focus more there. For me, I sort of look for anything where the end user makes the purchase decision. My background is all consumer. I spent 15 years building products and services for end users and on the consumer side. But I think the consumerization of the enterprise is a well-trodden path now, and so basically any product or service where the end user is swiping a credit card and making that purchase decision is something I'm excited to look at.
Fantastic. So we have just over 100 people actually that are tuning in, which is I think maybe more than we've ever had for one of these.
We were expecting someone else. I think they're all wondering like when you bring on the big show. They're like, okay, enough with the warm up. Like bring in the real guy.
So I kind of have a question. So John O'Reilly beside me works with all our investors across our conferences around the world, helping to deliver to them the type of value that they're seeking out from attending a conference. So I'm wondering from your point of view as an investor, and I think this will be helpful for any of the startups that watch this afterwards or that are listening right now, why do you attend conferences? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so I think the number one reason is, I think there's two things sort of in parallel. One is the chance to reconnect with investors, co-investors, angels, people we work with on the investing side who will also be going to the conference. So it's a great way to make connections with syndicate partners. I also think it's a great way to be back in touch with entrepreneurs that we've already invested in, or maybe we chose not to invest and now they've been very successful, and so we can sort of say sorry about that and sort of let them know that there's no loss of respect. And then the other thing there is it's a chance to meet people. I love the name Collision because you sort of run into someone at a conference, you never met them before, they're working on something very interesting, and I think network density increases the probability of those collisions being valuable. And so when you can bring together 1,000 startups and I can have the chance to make an impression on some number of those people, either with quick conversations in passing or around getting a coffee, or you're sitting in a session next to someone and you get to know them a little bit, and you have a context in terms of you're sharing an experience of learning something, and you can understand someone a little better based on what they take out of it versus what you take out of it.
So that leads me on to kind of another question. In the case of, say, Travis, the CEO of Uber, he tells this story about how he's at the Web Summit in 2011, and in two separate kind of, on a pub crawl and in a pub, he met two investors that went on in the immediate kind of days that followed to invest in Uber. They both put in 25 million at that point at a kind of 250 million, quarter of a billion valuation. Now, those type of chance encounters don't happen for every entrepreneur, but for the entrepreneurs that are listening, what are the kind of maybe the do's and don'ts of trying to interact with or meet an investor at a conference that you make a kind of positive first maybe impact on an investor? Any advice?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing I would say is don't pitch. Right, like it's very difficult if you think about all the things that need to go right for a pitch to be understood. You need proper focus. You need context. You need to really be able to engage and have a longer conversation. And oftentimes, in a pub, in a hallway at a conference, even sitting in a session, there's just not the opportunity to really do that. And so I think when someone comes up to you at a conference and they say, "I really want to tell you about what I'm working on," it's hard to actually engage in that conversation. I think much more compelling is this is who I am. I'm building, for if it was Travis, I'm building a company where you push a button and get a black car. And at that point, people had heard of Uber, so I'm building Uber. And then I think if there's interest to get to know each other on a personal level, I think you take advantage of that. And just like you would go to hang out with a group of friends at a pub, and there's someone new that you've never met before, and you engage and you like them, and then you follow up. I think that's a much better approach. So for entrepreneurs to have a clear sense of who they'd like to meet before the conference, so when they see that person, they can sort of try to engage in a conversation.
So that's a really interesting point about who you might like to meet before a conference. So I've had lots of discussions over the years with different investors, and some of them will tell me, oh, don't bother reaching out to me until about maybe a day before the conference. Others will say, oh, make it 2 or 3 days. In your experience, if people start kind of inbounding you to connect at a conference, is there generally a comfortable period where you begin to zone in and start thinking actively about, okay, I'm attending this conference, okay, I'll open this email? I kind of say that in the context, maybe like 3 weeks is just clearly way too far out from a conference for you to be kind of in the zone where you're actively thinking about who you're going to meet at that conference. Is there a kind of a best practice from your point of view?
I think so. So it depends on the goal. If somebody wants to meet for coffee, lunch, breakfast, dinner, in the context of a conference, it's basically like saying, we're both going to be in this. We should get together. I think that is, 2 weeks out, 1 week out is completely appropriate. The probability of getting those meetings, just given the fact that people go to these conferences to have the opportunity for collisions rather than to follow a calendar specifically, I think I'm much more likely to decline those meetings and say, why don't we just find me at the conference and we can touch base quickly, rather than committing up front to an hour to a multiple-hour meal. And so I think it's much better actually when I was an entrepreneur going to conferences, I would do research and identify who I wanted to meet, figure out how to track them down, and have the first contact actually be in person at the conference, and then focus on creating an opportunity for a longer meeting after the conference rather than at the conference.
And so in general then, in terms of wider preparation for a startup going to a conference, are there a few things, given that you have been you've played both roles, is there some advice that you would give, a previous you 15 years ago?
Yeah, I think so investors are big ego people, and so you want to figure out who you think you should be talking to based on their firm, their portfolio, the types of things they're interested in, and then look at their picture, make sure you have you know who they are, and you can even create a little cheat sheet in Evernote with someone's profile and a photo, and then have that on your phone, and then you're sort of looking for people, and if you see them, be able to start the conversation with a compliment. That always gets people to want to hear more, because that's a good thing. And then have a quick sentence on, hey, this is what I'm doing, and then ask them if it'd be okay if you followed up with them to set a time to chat, or send them some materials or a summary after the conference. And I think most investors, some will just say yes, sure, send it to me, and then it goes into a black hole of email. But I think for me, if someone tells me what they're doing and it sounds compelling, and I say, please send me an email and just put collision conference in the subject, then I make an effort to get back to all those people in a timely fashion. And I also am fine if someone says, hey, we're building a new solar panel technology for Asia, and the company's based in Shanghai. Like, I can just say no. We don't invest outside the United States, basically. And that feels like a super capital-intensive business, not software-driven. It's not what we do. And I'm happy to give that that answer while we pour each other coffee. Like, that's fine.
Great. So just if anybody wants to ask any questions, if they're in the kind of Hangout, you can add a question into the comments section underneath the stream, and John's going to get to a few of those questions in a moment. And another question I think is really kind of relevant to an entrepreneur, especially somebody that's starting out for the first time and they're meeting investors. It's how long does it usually take from the point of meeting somebody to the point of investment? I'm sure there's no kind of quick and fast rule, but perhaps there's a kind of some sort of broader general kind of advice you could give young first-time entrepreneurs.
So I think the easy answer is it depends, but the real answer is I think it's on the entrepreneur's job is to lay out a timeline and to ask questions about the investor's process. So I'm happy to tell entrepreneurs that our standard process is you meet with one partner, you meet with another partner, and then you come into a partner meeting, and then we make a decision and invest. And I know that process can sometimes be accomplished as quickly as 24 hours, but on average, that process is about 3 weeks long. And so, I'm fine being very transparent about that. If an entrepreneur is on a much longer timeline and they say, hey, I'm just getting started, I'd love to get to know you, I want to spend time with my potential investors, and I'm really doing this as it's obviously a partnership that is harder to unwind than a marriage. And so I'm talking to you now, but I'm not going to be raising for 6 months. Then that process can take 6 months. But I think most really good firms are willing to let the entrepreneur's timeline drive the process. And the faster you want the process to be, the higher the hurdle is to kind of get engagement around that process. But for someone like a Travis, I'm sure that a conversation in a pub led to a $50 million investment. You look at where Uber is today, and that makes sense.
Yeah. So they actually signed the term sheets in the business centre of the Shelbourne Hotel in Dublin, which is kind of a testament to the speed at which Travis moves, and he's moved Uber. It's pretty incredible. So just touching on something that you raised about entrepreneurs talking to you 6 months out from kind of potentially raising. Is there ever a point where you think an entrepreneur should consider, hey, maybe it's a little bit too soon to kind of start talking to us? We're kind of seed stage investors. Would love to see kind of a bit of a working prototype. Or do you have any kind of sense? Maybe there's never a time when it's.
For us, there's no such thing as too early for a conversation for first round.
Okay.
I think it's different for a Series A fund. It may be different for other seed funds, but certainly for first round. The moment someone has an idea and they believe they can build a company with that idea, I think we'd love to engage. The other thing is we have lots of resources and a strong belief in supporting the entrepreneurial community in general. And so, we've built out Dorm Room Fund to help support student entrepreneurship, and we've broadened the definition of community from companies that we've invested in and their employees to the broader entrepreneurial community, and we're trying to build products and services and events that will support the broader community. And so I think whether somebody if it may be too early for someone to ask for an investment, but I think it's never too early to have the conversation and talk about what they're doing, and sort of for them to look to us to provide some free consulting, and they can assess how valuable that is and get a sense of our product. Because at the end of the day, when we invest, we put money in the entrepreneur's bank account, but they're the ones buying our product, right? Like they're buying it with their equity, and their equity is a finite resource. And so we really view, they should be doing, and we sit on the sell side, on the buy side of the equation.
Right. So before I might go to John for a question in a moment, whether he's going to take it from himself or from online. I've just got kind of one final question. I'll hand it over to John, and then we might come back for kind of work towards a bit of a wrap up. So can you define the word hustle? What is a hustling entrepreneur in your eyes?
So I think I sort of look at it as two words. One is so someone who is incredibly efficient. They're able to get a lot done in a short amount of time, and prioritize it. We're doing the highest first. And then the second thing is clever. So they do things that are unique, interesting. They find delivery to find it, and they figure out ways of making it more efficient and sort of it's surprising how much they've done and how they dig into how they do it. It's sort of the thing that they know about.
Seems Google Hangouts are jumping a tiny bit back and forth. I might just hand it over to John.
Yeah, Finn, I speak with a lot of investors, like in the lead up to events at them and in the days following. And a lot of the feedback I get from them is that while they're meeting a lot of interesting startups, often those startups fall outside of their sweet spot, so there isn't really a whole lot of stuff that they can do to help them. So while you're going to do your due diligence on any startup that you invest in, do you have any tips for startups in ways that they should be preparing and to focus in on those investors that are really going to be of relevance to the startups themselves, rather than just hitting every investor there and hoping one of them will be their savior?
Sure. So I think the best thing to do is to understand an investor's portfolio, what else they've invested in, and then potentially to reach out to entrepreneurs that have already partnered with that and ask them about considering the onsite investor after looking at value and trying to understand that company and at the current stage. Was that garbled? I was getting feedback on that, so it was sort of echoing.
People or to run into people in the general conference area.
Were we muted there for a moment?
Yeah, you were muted for a second. I couldn't hear you. I could see you obviously talking. I couldn't hear you. So,
that was my fault. You're going to have to go your question again.
Technical difficulties. What do you see the value of going to the speakers and listening to a lot of the content versus spending their time out hustling or meeting with people on the general conference floor?
So I think if there's a speaker that you want to meet, or someone who's going to be talking about a topic that's very relevant to your business, and so you believe other people in that room will be relevant to your business, I think going to sessions makes a lot of sense. There's always a seat in the front row, so if you want to get the attention of a speaker, most of them will sort of either leave a little bit of time, depending on the format, may leave time to take questions, and coming prepared with a question to ask a speaker, sitting in the front row and asking that question is a great way to get their attention and be able to follow up with them afterwards, either right then in person to follow up on the question, or via email to say, hey, I was the person who asked the question about this thing. I'd love to follow up, and I think that can get the attention of the speaker. And then in the room, I think it's always great to have an opening. Every conversation, the hardest part is the icebreaker. And so if you think, if you're in a business that is highly relevant to the topic, and you think that room will be a sort of a concentration of people that care about that topic, it might be good for you to be in that room and then use the conversation, continue the conversation that the speaker started as you exit the room and head to a lunch or a dinner or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's a great point. Another question that's just come in, I think we'll leave this as our last as we come towards the hour. And it's a good way, I think, for you to set expectations, but how much time should startups expect an investor to have for them at an event? Because while you're going to meet a lot of great ideas and a lot of great companies, you can't be expected to spend all your time with them. But how much time should a startup expect to get from you and then to follow it up post-conference?
Yeah, so I think expecting to be able to say hello, be able to say a little bit about what they're doing, and then agree either to follow up or not. And that should take anywhere from 35 seconds to 15 minutes, depending on the company and the follow-up questions that I might have to get clarity around the entrepreneur's vision, their motivation, and the market that they're attacking. But I think that would be the standard. Outside of that, I think the expectation around social engagement should be very high. So, there's no reason that if everyone's going to grab a drink that, you can't have that conversation with the founder about, hey, where'd you grow up? What's your story? What are you working on? What, did you see this new thing that Amazon's doing where you run out of Tide and you press a button in your laundry room and Tide shows up that day? These things are just, we're all in the tech industry. We're all fascinated by building the future, and we should have conversations about that, regardless of whether it's specific to your company, to First Round, but just in general, all of us can get smarter by engaging in that way.
I think that's great. So I have a final question before we wrap up, and it has to do with kind of conference hacking. So over the years, both kind of organizing and going to other conferences, I've kind of, picked up on some, I don't know if you want to call them conference hacks. One of them for me is that, sometimes some of the most valuable interactions don't happen from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., but actually happen from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And so for me, one of the hacks that I've learned is, if you can find the hotel where most of the kind of maybe speakers or investors may end up at about midnight, when most people have faded and gone to bed, you'll sometimes tend to have some of the most fascinating and kind of surreal conversations with people who are now kind of pretty kind of relaxed and just enjoying themselves. So that's my kind of hack. And if you can afford it as an early stage startup, sometimes staying in the more expensive hotel, you'll be surprised who at the breakfast buffet or in the lobby late at night you'll bump into. And sometimes at much bigger conferences, those hotels are kind of, unless you've got a guest pass, you can't get into certain areas in the hotel or even the hotel itself. So those are just two kind of little hacks that come to mind. And I'm wondering, kind of, Phin, in your case, if there's any like little hack that comes to mind, there may not be, that you'd like to share with anybody that's listening to just get that little bit of extra out of a conference.
Absolutely. So the thing that I do that I find really helpful is, I set up my phone to take voice memos, and when I take the voice memo and hit record, I use that here to send it to my email and record the file in Dropbox for digestion later. And after I meet people, what I try to do is quickly, step away right at the moment. You can look like you're on the phone. You have a headset. You can look like you're on the phone, and just make a note to myself. Voice is way faster than writing. After I write down something in a notebook, I can't read my own writing half the time. So you use the voice note, and I usually try to track what I keep track of it I call it bagel. But it's basics, asks for the person, gives, things that you could give them to add value, extras, so little things that they mention about their family or friends or a topic they're fascinated by, and then learning, so things you learned from them in that conversation. And if I can capture that, then after the conference, when I follow up, the email is much richer, and it has detail that reminds the person of the context of the conversation, and they're much more likely to respond. I also find that if you're really good and motivated, when like you said, everyone fades at midnight or 2 a.m., you can use from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. to go through those voice memos and write the emails right then, which I think you're very likely to sit at the top of someone's inbox and get that attention if you have sort of that magical instantaneous follow-up.
Wow, Phin Barnes of First Round. It's been fascinating talking. That's a fantastic kind of life hack, never mind conference hack. We really appreciate the time. We look forward to seeing you at Collision.
Thanks so much for having me. I look forward to seeing you as well.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.